My name is Natalie Brooks. Growing up in the Brooks family felt like living in a house made of glass. Everyone could see me, but no one really looked. My parents, Mark and Karen, always had their favorites, and it wasn't me. It was Jake, my older brother. Everything Jake did was celebrated, from the smallest achievements to his loud, brash jokes that made everyone laugh at the dinner table. Meanwhile, I learned early on that my accomplishments barely registered. I graduated early, with honors, scholarships lining up for college. I was proud of myself, but the moment I tried to share that pride at home, it vanished into thin air. My father would glance at me, barely hiding his boredom. "That's nice, Natalie," he'd say without enthusiasm. My mother would mumble, "You're too sensitive. Maybe you should focus on finding a nice husband instead of these silly ideas." Jake? He never missed a chance to remind me I was the awkward nerd who wouldn't make it anywhere. I felt like a ghost in my own family. At every gathering, every birthday, every holiday, I was there. But I wasn't seen. It wasn't just indifference. It was something colder. A quiet betrayal. The kind that hurts more because it comes from people who should love you unconditionally. They made it clear through words and silence that I was too much or not enough, depending on the moment. At night, I'd lie awake, heart aching, wondering why I wasn't enough for the people who brought me into this world. I wanted to scream, to beg for their approval, but I learned early on to hold my tongue. Still, beneath that quiet exterior, a fire burned. A desperate, stubborn hope that one day they would see me for who I was. Not just their disappointment or the invisible daughter. One day, I told them I was moving out. I was ready to leave the suffocating shadows behind. My father barely looked up. "Good luck," he said, voice heavy with doubt. But for the first time in my life, I felt free. Because sometimes, to be seen, you have to disappear first. Leaving home wasn't easy, but it was necessary. That night at Jake's promotion party was the last straw. A brutal reminder that I wasn't welcome in their world. The room was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and proud smiles directed at Jake. I sat quietly, clutching my phone, rehearsing the words I'd been dying to say for months. I had built something real. A tech startup designed to help freelancers find safe, reliable work. I thought maybe, just maybe, this was the moment they'd finally listen. Gathering my courage, I spoke up. "I've been working on a platform that's gaining traction with investors. It could change the way freelancers connect with clients." The room froze. My dad let out a harsh laugh, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Natalie, that's cute, but you're dreaming. Real life doesn't work like that." My mom gave a tight smile, shaking her head. "Why don't you focus on something practical? Maybe think about settling down instead of chasing impossible dreams." Jake smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, little sis, maybe you should marry rich instead of wasting time on this." I felt a sharp sting in my chest, like a fist pushing the breath out of me. The people I loved most saw me as a joke. That night, the laughter felt like a cruel echo bouncing off the walls of a house I no longer belonged to. I packed my things in silence, tears blurring my vision. No one asked where I was going. No one said goodbye. I left because I had to save the part of me that still believed I was worth more than their words. The pain was raw, but beneath it, something stronger grew. A fierce determination not to be defined by their rejection. I was done waiting for their approval. I was ready to build a life where I was seen and valued, even if it meant doing it all alone. The apartment I moved into was small and bare. Just a bed, a desk, and a flickering lamp. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A place where I could finally breathe. away from the shadows of my family's doubt. I didn't tell anyone where I was. To them, I was just another lost girl who couldn't make it. But every hour I spent alone was a battle fought with hope and sweat. I poured myself into my startup, NB Systems, working late into the night, teaching myself coding, pitching to anyone who'd listen. There were days when the loneliness was overwhelming, when I missed the warmth of a family, even a cold one. I missed the ease of being part of something, no matter how flawed. But I knew I couldn't go back until I had something real to show them. Rejection emails piled up. Bugs crashed my code. Investors said no more times than I could count. Every failure felt like a punch to the gut, but I refused to quit. The words my family had said, the dismissals, the cruel jokes, they echoed in my mind like a challenge. "You're nothing," they said. I was going to prove them wrong. Slowly, my company grew. Clients came. I hired a small team. And though I kept my family in the dark, I felt the weight of their disbelief lifting with every new contract signed. I built my dream in silence. No grand announcements, no celebrations, just quiet, relentless work. Sometimes I would look in the mirror and barely recognize the woman staring back, stronger, quieter, and ready. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I was someone to be reckoned with, and when the time came, I would show them all. Months turned into years, and NB Systems started to quietly gain traction. What began as a one-woman operation in a cramped apartment became a respected tech firm, with a growing client list. I still kept my family in the dark about the progress. They didn't deserve to know until I was ready to face them, not as the invisible daughter, but as a force they could no longer ignore. The irony wasn't lost on me. One of our biggest clients was the very company my father worked for, the same company where he held a respected position. I learned this by chance. An email from a client manager congratulating me on a successful project. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept quiet. At family dinners, the conversations circled around work, promotions, and big deals. My father would boast about the company's new partnerships, unaware that I was behind some of those contracts. Jake continued to mock my dead-end job at the call center I used to work, oblivious to the fact that the company he bragged about was secretly intertwined with mine. Every time they praised themselves, I felt the fire inside me grow stronger. I was preparing for the moment when I would reveal the truth, a moment that would shake their world, but it wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity and showing myself what I was truly capable of. Some nights, I'd lie awake, imagining their faces when they realized the girl they dismissed was running the show behind the scenes. I was no longer the broken girl begging for attention. I was becoming a woman who made her own path, one silent step at a time. And soon, that silence would be broken. Then, one day, an unexpected invitation arrived. An exclusive gala hosted by my father's company. First, I hesitated. Did I want to face them? To sit among the people who had dismissed me my whole life? But something inside me said yes. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment to step out of the shadows. I prepared carefully. I bought a dress that made me feel powerful and polished. I rehearsed what I might say, not just to impress, but to remind them who I was. The night of the gala, I arrived early. The grand ballroom was glittering with chandeliers and filled with suited executives, laughter, and champagne glasses. My family was there, as expected. My father, proud and aloof. My mother, trying to look elegant but tense. Jake, loud and cocky as ever. They hadn't noticed me yet. I was just another face in the crowd. But I didn't mind. I was waiting for the right moment. I watched my father mingle, shaking hands and boasting about new deals. My mother smiled politely at a few guests, clearly trying to maintain appearances. Jake was already regaling a group with exaggerated stories of his success. I took a deep breath and reminded myself, this wasn't about their approval. This was about my truth. Then, across the room, a tall man in a sharp suit approached. He was the CEO, the same man who had been mentioned in company emails as someone important. He stopped in front of me, eyes bright with recognition. "Ms. Brooks," he said with a genuine smile. My heart skipped. Suddenly the room shifted. Conversations paused. Heads turned. This was it. The moment when the invisible daughter would finally be seen. The CEO's eyes locked onto mine with a warmth that surprised me. "Ms. Brooks," he said again, "it's an honor to finally meet you." My father's confident smile faltered as he noticed the man's attention on me. My mother's hand tightened around her clutch, and Jake's casual smirk slipped for the first time that night. The room fell into an uneasy silence, all eyes shifting toward us. "I've heard a lot about you," the CEO continued, voice clear and proud. "Your work with NB Systems has been instrumental to our company's success." Whispers rippled across the room. Some guests exchanged surprised glances. Others stared, mouths slightly open. I felt a rush of calm sweep over me. After years of being ignored, dismissed, and belittled, here I was, recognized in the company my family had boasted about for years. I straightened my shoulders and met my father's gaze. The man who had once called me nothing now stood, speechless. The CEO turned back to me and said with a slight nod, "Would you like to say a few words?" I took a breath and stepped forward. "Thank you. It's been a long journey, but I'm proud of what NB Systems has achieved. I'm grateful to work alongside such talented people and to help shape the future of this company." My voice was steady, filled with the quiet strength I'd built over years of struggle. The crowd erupted into polite applause. I caught my mother's eyes. There was shock, regret, maybe even a hint of pride buried deep beneath her carefully composed facade. Jake looked away, unable to meet mine. And my father? He nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement that I was no longer invisible. That night, the invisible daughter finally stepped into the light. The gala ended, but the silence that followed was heavier than any words they could have said. I returned home that night with a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The recognition was real, finally, but it didn't erase the years of neglect and pain. My phone stayed silent. No congratulatory texts from my parents. No calls from Jake pretending everything was fine. The next morning, I saw the cold truth in their eyes when I visited home briefly, like I was a stranger who had walked into their carefully crafted world and disrupted the order. "Nice speech," my mother said, her tone clipped, almost resentful. "Don't think this changes anything," my father added, eyes narrowed. I wanted to scream, to remind them that this did change everything, that the girl they ignored was the woman standing tall today. But I stayed quiet. Because sometimes the strongest response is calm. I realized then that I wasn't fighting for their approval anymore. I was fighting for myself, to heal, to grow, to move on. Friends and colleagues reached out with congratulations, offers of support, and opportunities. Their belief in me was a balm to the wounds my family left open. In that quiet space, I found something I hadn't known I was missing. Respect. From others, yes, but more importantly, from myself. The years of being overlooked had taught me resilience, but also the value of self-love. I started setting boundaries with my family. I stopped letting their words define me. It was painful, yes, but necessary. I was no longer their invisible daughter. I was my own woman, worthy, strong, and ready to write my own story. And this time, I would be the one holding the pen. The weeks after the gala brought a strange calm. My family's cold shoulders and half-hearted attempts at conversation felt like invisible walls. Walls I was finally ready to build around myself. I stopped answering their calls immediately. I let their texts go unread. No longer was I rushing to fix their hurtful words or prove myself to them. Instead, I focused on my own healing, my own peace. At work, NB Systems was thriving. I hired more staff, expanded our services, and even spoke at conferences about the future of freelance work. Each success was a quiet rebellion against the years they told me I'd never amount to anything. One evening, my mother called. I debated, ignoring the call but decided to answer. "Natalie," she said, voice unsteady, "we're worried about you. This distance, it's not healthy." For a moment, I felt the old guilt creep in, the one that told me family must come first. No matter the cost. But this time, I stood firm. "Mom, I love you, but I can't keep living to please people who don't see me. I'm finding myself, and that means setting boundaries." There was silence on the other end. "I don't want to lose you," she finally whispered. "I'm not losing myself anymore," I said softly. It was the hardest conversation I'd ever had, but also the most liberating. I realized that love without respect is painful, that sometimes protecting your heart means stepping back, even from those who share your blood. My family wasn't ready to change, but I was ready to move forward, on my own terms. In that moment, I became not just the woman they ignored, but the woman I always wanted to be. Strong, clear, and unapologetically me. With boundaries in place, I finally had the space to hear my own voice, something I hadn't truly done in years. In the quiet moments, I wrote, not just business plans or emails, but my story, raw and unfiltered. The pain, the rejection, the strength I found buried beneath it all. I started sharing parts of my journey online, not to seek pity, but to connect. To show others who felt invisible that they were not alone. Messages began pouring in. Stories of people silenced by their families, held back by doubt, but still fighting. For the first time, I saw the power of my own experience. My pain wasn't just my own. It was a bridge to others who needed hope. I spoke at women's groups, tech meetups, and even at schools, sharing how rejection can be fuel and invisibility can be a stepping stone. Each time my voice grew stronger, I wasn't just the girl my family ignored. I was a woman with a story worth telling and a future worth fighting for. And as I stood before crowds, I felt the old wounds soften, replaced by pride and purpose. One day, I received an email from my father's office. It wasn't from him, but from a senior executive, someone who had heard my talks and wanted to connect. It was a small step, but it felt like the beginning of a new chapter. Not a chapter where I sought their approval, but one where I claimed my own space, on my terms. I was finally free to be seen, not as an invisible daughter, but as a woman who had found her voice and wouldn't be silenced again. Years had passed since I was the girl no one noticed. The invisible daughter had become a woman who commanded respect, not by demanding it, but by living her truth. That final encounter at the gala was more than just recognition. It was the moment I reclaimed my power, my dignity, and my voice. My relationship with my family remained complicated. There were still walls, cold silences, and unspoken words. But I no longer carried their judgments as my burden. I had built a life defined by my own terms, filled with people who saw me, valued me, and lifted me up. Looking back, I realized how much their rejection shaped me, how it forced me to find strength I didn't know I had, to fight quietly, and to never settle for less than I deserved. I am proud of the woman I've become, the one who turned pain into power, invisibility into presence. To anyone out there feeling ignored or unworthy, I want you to know your story matters. Your voice deserves to be heard. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought in silence, away from the eyes of those who doubt us. But every step forward, no matter how quiet, is a victory. I'm no longer just my family's forgotten daughter. I am Natalie Brooks, seen, heard, and unstoppable. And this is only the beginning.